If you're between 60 and 80 years old and you still have these 7 abilities, you're doing better than a lot of people realize. Maybe even better than you realize. Because most people have the wrong idea about what aging well actually looks like. They think successful aging means looking 40 at 75, having endless energy, never slowing down, never forgetting anything, never needing help, and somehow waking up every morning excited to stretch, meal prep, and power walk before sunrise. But real life doesn't look like that. Real life looks a lot more ordinary. It looks like getting out of bed without help. It looks like remembering your medications. It looks like bouncing back after a rough patch. It looks like staying connected to people. It looks like adapting when your body or routines change. And honestly, after years of working with older adults, Senior Nutrition Expert can tell you this. The people who are truly aging well are usually not the people chasing perfection. They're the people protecting their function. They're the people holding on to independence. They're the people who keep adjusting, keep learning, and keep showing up for life in the ways that still matter. That is what winning at aging really looks like. Because aging well is not about pretending nothing changed. Of course things change. Energy changes. Joints change. Sleep changes. Appetite changes. Recovery changes. Sometimes even standing up becomes a small negotiation between your knees and your dignity. That's part of life. But the real question is not whether things changed. The real question is this: can you still live your life with a meaningful level of function, resilience, connection, and self-direction? If the answer is yes, then you are probably doing much better than you think. And that matters because too many people only focus on what they've lost. They compare themselves to a younger version of themselves and decide they're failing just because they're not as fast, as strong, or as effortless as they used to be. But that is the wrong comparison. At this stage of life, the goal is not to outperform your 30-year-old self. The goal is to preserve as much independence, stability, and quality of life as possible. That is the real victory. So let's talk about the 7 abilities that are some of the clearest signs that you are winning at aging. And if you still have these, even imperfectly, even if some days are better than others, then you have more going for you than you may have realized. Ability number 1 is getting up and moving independently. This sounds simple, but it is one of the biggest signs of functional aging. If you can get out of bed, get out of a chair, use the bathroom on your own, move safely through your home, and handle the normal physical transitions of daily life without depending entirely on someone else, that is a major strength. A lot of people underestimate mobility because it feels basic. But basic abilities are exactly the ones that determine how independent you can remain. Mobility affects everything. It affects confidence. It affects freedom. It affects whether you can cook, clean, shop, visit people, go to appointments, and enjoy life outside your 4 walls. When mobility declines, life can start shrinking very quickly. People stop going out as much. They avoid stairs. They skip activities. They lose confidence. They start feeling older not only in the body, but in the mind too. That's why this ability matters so much. Being able to rise, walk, turn, sit, stand, and move through your environment safely is not a small thing. It is one of the foundations of independence. And many people who still have this ability don't appreciate it because they're too busy noticing that they're slower than they used to be. But slower does not mean weak. Slower does not mean failing. Slower does not mean you are losing. If you can still move yourself through the day without major reliance on others, that is an important sign of strength. Senior Nutrition Expert has seen many older adults complain that they're doing terribly, while at the same time they are still dressing themselves, driving, shopping, cooking, and managing their own day. That is not doing terribly. That is functioning. That is capability. That is life still working in meaningful ways. No, maybe you don't jump off the couch like you did at 25. Very few people do. At this point, sometimes standing up from a low chair feels like your body is filing a formal complaint. But if you can still do it, you are preserving something that matters deeply. You are preserving mobility. And mobility is one of the strongest predictors of long-term independence there is. Ability number 2 is recovering after setbacks. This one matters more than people realize, because after 60, life often becomes less predictable. A small illness can hit harder. A fall can shake your confidence. A surgery can interrupt your routine. Grief can affect your energy. Stress can affect your sleep, your appetite, and your motivation all at once. And one of the clearest signs of healthy aging is not that nothing bad ever happens. It's that when something does happen, you slowly find your way back. Not immediately, not perfectly, but eventually. That ability to recover, reset, and re-enter life after something difficult is a huge form of resilience. A lot of people think resilience means pretending everything is fine. It doesn't. Resilience is not denial. Resilience means something happened, it affected you, and even so, you found a way to keep going. Maybe more slowly, maybe more carefully, maybe with more support than before, but forward. That still counts. In fact, it counts a lot. Because aging well is not about avoiding all hardship. It is about what happens after hardship shows up. Can you rebuild your routine? Can you get your footing back? Can you return to your habits, your responsibilities, and your sense of self after life knocks things off balance? If you can, that is a very strong sign. Senior nutrition expert often sees the difference between people who decline after a setback and people who eventually recover from one. It's not always the severity of the event. Sometimes it's the ability to re-engage afterward, to start again, to adjust, to keep some perspective, to not let one bad chapter become the entire story. That is powerful. Because the truth is, aging requires recovery again and again. Plans change. Bodies change. Circumstances change. Sometimes your energy disappears for a while. Sometimes motivation drops. Sometimes you go through a season where nothing feels easy. But if you still have the ability to regroup, adapt, and come back, then you are showing one of the most important forms of strength there is. You are showing resilience. And resilience is one of the biggest reasons some people continue aging well, even when life gets hard. Ability number 3 is managing your daily health with awareness. This includes understanding your medications, remembering routines, keeping appointments, noticing changes in your body, and staying involved in your own care. This ability may not look exciting, but it is incredibly important, because health management gets complicated fast. A lot of older adults are not dealing with just one issue. They may be thinking about blood pressure, blood sugar, digestion, sleep, joint pain, hydration, supplements, meal timing, medications, follow-ups, and lab work all at the same time. That is a lot. And if you are still the person who understands what you're taking, why you're taking it, when you need it, and how your body is responding, that is a major sign of cognitive and practical independence. It means you are still actively participating in your own health. You are not disconnected from the process. You are still engaged. And engagement matters, because one of the easiest ways health starts to slip is when people become passive. They stop paying attention. They stop asking questions. They forget what changed. They miss doses. They ignore symptoms. They stop noticing patterns. And over time, those small gaps can become big problems. That's why this ability deserves more respect than it usually gets. If you can still follow your basic care routines and make sense of what your body needs, you are doing something important. You are helping protect your independence. Now, this does not mean you have to do everything perfectly. Of course not. Using reminders is not failure. Using pill organizers is not failure. Writing things down is not failure. Asking for help when needed is not failure. Those are smart tools. Those are adaptations. And smart adaptation is part of aging well. The point is not doing everything with no support at all. The point is staying involved. If you still know what is happening with your health, if you still take ownership of your routines, and if you still participate in your care decisions, that is a major strength. Senior nutrition expert would tell you that awareness is one of the most protective things an older adult can have. Because aware people notice problems sooner. Aware people ask better questions. Aware people make better adjustments. And those small advantages can add up in a big way over time. So if your medication list is getting longer, your routine is more complicated than it used to be, and yet you still have a handle on it, give yourself some credit. That is not small. That is a real sign of functional aging. Ability number 4 is staying socially connected. This one is deeply underrated. People spend so much time talking about bones, blood pressure, blood sugar, and brain health that they forget one of the biggest protective factors in aging: human connection. If you still talk to friends, stay involved with family, participate in conversations, answer calls, make calls, show up for gatherings, or simply maintain meaningful contact with other people, that is a powerful sign of healthy aging. Because isolation can quietly change everything. It doesn't always happen dramatically. Sometimes it begins after retirement, sometimes after a move, sometimes after losing a spouse. Sometimes after illness makes it easier to stay home. Sometimes after disappointment or grief makes a person withdraw without even realizing it. And once that withdrawal begins, a person's world can start getting smaller. Less conversation, less laughter, less stimulation, less support, less motivation. And over time, isolation can affect far more than mood. It can affect appetite, energy, memory, confidence, routine. Even physical activity. People are not built to do well in long-term disconnection. We need interaction. We need belonging. We need reminders that we still matter in other people's lives. That's why this ability matters so much. If you still have the ability and willingness to remain connected to others, you are protecting your emotional health in a very real way. Senior nutrition expert has seen that some of the strongest older adults are not necessarily the ones with the fewest aches and pains. They're often the ones who stay connected. They still check in on people. They still ask questions. They still make room for conversation. They still allow themselves to be part of life instead of stepping outside it. That matters. And social connection does not mean being constantly busy or surrounded by people all the time. You do not need a packed social calendar. For some people, healthy connection looks like 1 or 2 close relationships, a weekly visit, a phone call, a neighbor, a church group, a walking partner, a child, sibling, or friend you speak to regularly. The size of the circle matters less than the strength of the connection. If your life still includes meaningful human contact, that is a sign of emotional health, psychological resilience, and continued engagement with life. And that is one of the clearest signs that you are aging better than you think. Ability number 5 is staying curious and mentally engaged. This one surprises people, but it matters a lot, because mental aging is not just about memory. It is also about interest. If you still want to learn, ask questions, read, explore ideas, try new things, solve little problems, follow topics that interest you, or stay mentally involved in the world around you, that is a major advantage. Curiosity keeps the mind active. It keeps life from becoming emotionally flat. It keeps identity alive. A person who is still interested in something is still reaching outward, and that matters more than people realize. One of the sad shifts that can happen with age is not just physical slowing, it is mental narrowing. A person stops exploring, stops wondering, stops engaging, stops learning. The world becomes smaller, not only physically, but mentally too. Curiosity interrupts that. Curiosity says, I'm still here. I still care. I still want to understand. And that kind of engagement helps support emotional and cognitive resilience over time. Senior nutrition expert often notices that older adults who remain curious tend to stay more mentally alive in everyday life. Maybe they read about nutrition. Maybe they learn a new recipe. Maybe they ask better questions at appointments. Maybe they want to understand their body better. Maybe they learn how to use new technology, even if it annoys them first. Maybe they take interest in current events, hobbies, books, faith, gardening, or educational videos. It doesn't matter what the interest is. What matters is that the spark is still there. And no, you do not need to completely reinvent yourself. You do not need to become an expert in everything. You do not need to suddenly start traveling the world or take up 10 new hobbies. Sometimes curiosity looks very ordinary. Sometimes it's asking, why does this affect me now? Sometimes it's saying, I want to learn how to do that. Sometimes it's taking an interest in your own health. Sometimes it's being willing to adapt instead of shutting down. That openness matters, because an open mind often ages better than a closed one. If you still have curiosity, interest, and the desire to mentally stay involved with life, then you are carrying one of the strongest hidden advantages in healthy aging. Ability number 6 is adapting when your body and life change. This is one of the biggest abilities of all, because aging requires adaptation whether we like it or not. Your sleep may not be the same. Your digestion may change. Your appetite may change. Your energy may come in shorter windows. Your body may respond differently to stress. The foods you used to tolerate easily may not feel the same anymore. The routines that once worked may need adjusting. And the people who often age best are not the ones who spend all their energy fighting reality. They are the ones who learn how to adapt intelligently. That is where wisdom becomes practical. A lot of people resist change because change feels unfair. They get frustrated that their body does not respond like it used to. They get frustrated that recovery takes longer. They get frustrated that they now need more consistency, more rest, or better nutrition than before. And those feelings are understandable, but staying stuck in that frustration does not help, because reality usually does not change just because we resent it. Adaptation is what protects function. Senior nutrition expert talks about this often, especially when it comes to nutrition and daily living. As the body ages, it usually benefits from more intentional support, not less. More attention to protein, more attention to hydration, more attention to meal quality, more attention to digestive comfort, more attention to routines that support energy, strength, and recovery. Not necessarily harsher routines, not extreme routines, just smarter ones. That is not weakness. That is maturity. The same applies to the rest of life. Maybe you used to power through everything. Now you pace yourself. Maybe you used to skip meals and feel fine. Now you notice it affects your energy badly. Maybe you used to ignore sleep. Now you protect it because you feel the difference. Maybe you used to push through every ache. Now you listen sooner. That is adaptation. And adaptation is one of the clearest signs that a person is serious about staying functional. The people who do well over time often stop asking, why can't I do everything exactly the way I used to? And they start asking, what does my body need from me now? That question changes everything, because it leads to better choices. Better choices lead to better routines. Better routines help protect independence. So if you still have the ability to change your habits when your body or circumstances require it, that is a very strong sign. It means you are not rigid. You are responsive. You are self-aware. And self-awareness is one of the great strengths of healthy aging. Ability number 7 is keeping perspective and a sense of humor. Honestly, this may be the most underrated ability on the whole list, because aging comes with inconvenience. It comes with frustration. It comes with changes you didn't ask for. Things hurt that never used to hurt. Recovery takes longer. Names disappear for a second and then come back 5 minutes later when no one needs them anymore. You walk into a room and forget why you went there, then stand there acting like you meant to do that. This is life. And the people who often cope best are the ones who can still laugh. Not because everything is funny, not because life has been easy, not because they never struggle, but because humor creates emotional flexibility. Perspective protects peace. If you can still step back and say, well, this is ridiculous, and smile anyway, that tells me something important. It tells me you have not become completely hardened by the changes of life. It tells me you still have some room for grace, some room for lightness, some room to keep a hard moment from becoming your entire identity. That is powerful. Senior nutrition expert would tell you that mindset changes the aging experience more than many people realize. Two people can be the same age, with similar health issues, and yet experience life very differently. One becomes consumed by everything that changed. The other notices what still works. One sees every inconvenience as proof that life is over. The other says, "This is annoying, but I'm still here." That difference matters. Because perspective influences behavior. Behavior influences habits. Habits influence outcomes. Now, keeping perspective does not mean pretending pain is not real. It does not mean ignoring grief. It does not mean smiling through every hard thing. It simply means you still have the emotional ability to recover from frustration, adjust your thinking, and remember that one difficult moment does not define your entire life. That is a major strength. If you still have humor, perspective, and the ability to emotionally reset after life annoys, disappoints, or humbles you, then you are carrying something very valuable. You are carrying emotional resilience. And emotional resilience protects quality of life in a very real way. So here's the bottom line. Winning at aging does not mean never slowing down. It does not mean never needing help. It does not mean never getting diagnosed with anything. It does not mean looking young forever. That is not the standard. The real standard is function. Can you still move independently? Can you recover after setbacks? Can you stay involved in your health? Can you stay connected to people? Can you stay curious? Can you adapt your habits? Can you keep perspective? If you still have these 7 abilities, even in an imperfect, human, everyday way, then you are doing better than you may think. And that matters because too many older adults judge themselves unfairly. They focus only on what got slower, only on what became harder, only on what changed. And in doing that, they completely overlook what is still working. But what is still working matters. A lot. If these abilities are still present in your life, then you still have a strong foundation. You still have function. You still have resilience. You still have adaptability. You still have something worth protecting. And one of the best ways to protect that foundation is to stay engaged in your daily habits and in your own care. That is why Senior Nutrition Expert always emphasizes the basics that support long-term aging well: nourishing food, adequate protein, hydration, movement, recovery, consistency. Not perfection, consistency, because healthy aging is usually not built through dramatic changes. It is built through repeatable daily choices that help protect your body, your mind, and your independence over time. So if this message speaks to you, take a moment and think honestly. Which of these abilities do you still have? Which one do you feel strongest in? Which one do you want to protect more carefully? And which one surprised you the most? Because awareness is where better aging begins. And if you still have more strength, more function, and more resilience than you've been giving yourself credit for, then maybe today is a good day to recognize that. Not with denial, not with fantasy, but with gratitude. Because aging well is not about becoming someone else. It is about staying as fully yourself as possible for as long as possible. And that is a win.